Something about this whole Claressa Shields situation is making people stop, rewind, and ask the same question over and over again. Wait, which version are we supposed to believe? Because when the smoke clears, the belts are still there. The win is still there. The star power is still there. But the stories around the win? Man, that's where it starts getting slippery. One minute, the message is domination, history, big stage greatness, $8 million headlines. And another minute, the internet is doing what the internet always does when the math starts looking funny, pulling out calculators, replaying interviews, zooming in on that knee brace, and asking why every time a new detail drops, it feels like the story needs an extra explanation attached to it. And that's the part people are stuck on. Not whether Claressa can fight, because she absolutely can. Not whether she's accomplished, because the resume is crazy. The issue is that when you build your brand on being the loudest, the biggest, the richest, the most undeniable, then every little inconsistency gets treated like a courtroom exhibit. And right now, the audience is looking at the evidence table like, hold on, why do the numbers sound one way on TV, another way online, and a whole different way once the questions start flying? Why did the brace become a conversation? Why did the money become a conversation? Why does every celebration around this win come with a second debate hiding underneath it? That's what this is really about. This is not about whether Claressa Shields can box. This is about whether the packaging around Claressa Shields is finally moving faster than the facts. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Because the context matters here. Claressa didn't just win a fight, she stopped Kaye Scott in the 6th round, and the facts of the actual performance are strong. Shields won by 6th round TKO after Scott's corner threw in towels, and by the numbers, Shields landed 92 of 208 punches, while Scott landed 60 of 103. Shields also said she had cut from 198 pounds down to 160 over 14 weeks, and she weighed in at 159.8 the day before the bout, so this was not some casual cruise control night where nothing difficult happened behind the scenes. That's part of what makes this whole conversation so tricky. The in-ring result gives her real ammunition. She didn't squeak by. She won, and she won clearly. Before the fight, she was also leaning hard into the magnitude of the moment, saying being the first woman to headline at State Farm Arena motivated her and fit her mission of breaking barriers for the women coming behind her. So the event itself was framed not just as another defense or another title night, but as legacy, history, visibility, and proof of concept all in one. That's why the audience reaction is so loud now. When you market the night as a historic statement and then pair that with blockbuster money headlines and superstar rhetoric, fans don't just watch the punches, they watch the details. They watch the post-fight language. They watch what you said last month and what you say this week. They watch whether the image and the paperwork seem to be walking in the same direction. In other words, once you turn your whole career into an event, people start auditing the event. And the first thing they audited was the body language around that knee. That was never going to stay quiet. You put a visible brace on a champion who sells confidence like it's a second belt, and people are going to ask questions. Then, after the fight, Shields addressed it directly and said she sprained her knee 2 weeks earlier while training, saying she had been working on delivering power, that her knee popped out, and that she wore the brace to make sure it didn't pop out during the fight. She also said, despite that, she felt really good and really strong. Now on paper, that can all be true at the same time. Fighters go into bouts banged up all the time. A difficult camp does not automatically mean a compromised result. But you know how the audience hears it when they've already been primed for drama. If the brace was nothing to worry about before, why does it become part of the explanation after? If you looked dominant, why does the medical details suddenly become more central once the cameras are on? That doesn't prove deception, let's be very clear. It does not prove a lie. But it does create that familiar sports entertainment tension where fans start feeling like they are hearing two different presentations of the same reality. One version built for confidence before the bell, another version built for context after the bell. And once people feel that switch, they start scrutinizing everything else attached to the night with a whole new level of suspicion. Then comes the money conversation, and that is where this story really catches fire, because money turns opinion into arithmetic. Claressa went on CBS and talked about a multi-fight contract worth $8 million, calling it a 2-year deal. More importantly, she framed that number as basically the floor, saying the 8 M's were the minimum, talking about a large signing bonus and saying the deal was actually bigger than the number made public. Now that is a powerful headline. It sounds like breakthrough money. It sounds like a sport-changing contract. It sounds like the kind of deal you say out loud because you want the whole market to know women's boxing has another economic ceiling now. And to be fair, if a 2-year minimum guarantee really sits at that level, that is significant. That is not small talk. That is a serious business story. But the moment you say minimum, you also invite the meanest creature on the internet into the room, Captain Calculator. Because now people are hearing Claressa got paid. They are hearing Claressa is on a deal big enough that every future number should somehow reflect the blockbuster framing. That may not be fair. That may not be how contracts work. But once you sell the public an $8 million narrative, you have to know the public is going to compare every disclosed or rumored figure against that headline like they're grading homework with red ink.
And that is exactly why the reported purse chatter hit so hard. Online, a number circulated, claiming Shields' disclosed purse for the Kaye Scott fight was $500,000, allegedly tied to figures filed with the Georgia athletic authorities. Now, let me be careful here. That figure circulated heavily online, but the broader point is not whether one social media screenshot settles the case forever. The broader point is what happened culturally the minute that number entered the chat. Half the audience said, hold on, if the contract is $8 million minimum, why does this figure look like that? The other half said, y'all do not understand how contracts, guarantees, bonuses, back-end money, and promotional structures work. And that right there is the whole battlefield. Because a disclosed purse on paperwork is not always the same thing as total compensation. A guarantee is not always the same thing as fight night commission paperwork. A signing bonus can sit outside the one number fans are staring at. All of that is true, but, and this is the killer, but if the structure is complicated, then the branding should stop pretending the messaging is simple. That's what fans are reacting to, not complexity. People can accept complexity. What they hate is when complexity only shows up after the applause. They hate when the headline is clean, but the explanation is messy. They hate when the promotion sounds like a billboard and the defense sounds like a tax seminar. That is why the receipts line is landing so hard right now. And before Claressa supporters get mad, let's slow this down and keep it honest. It is completely possible that both things are true. It is possible the $8 million headline refers to a multi-fight minimum package over 2 years, with signing money and additional terms. It is also possible that one disclosed purse for one fight was significantly lower than what casual fans assumed when they heard that headline. Those things do not automatically cancel each other out. But here's where Miss Minimum Guarantee loses the room a little bit. When your public image is built on dominance, visibility, and I'm finally getting my just due, people expect the individual checkpoints to feel intuitively consistent. They expect a history-making contract to create history-making optics every time the numbers hit the timeline. They do not want to hear, well, technically, after you already sold them record-breaking. And yes, sometimes that's unfair, because fans simplify business they do not fully understand. But fighters and promoters know that. They know fans live off symbols. They know one number can become the whole story. So if you know that, why market the symbol so aggressively unless you are prepared to survive the audit that follows? That is why this is becoming a commentary topic instead of a straightforward victory lap. The fighting part is easier than the explaining part. The knockout was cleaner than the narrative. The left hook looked sharper than the accounting. And then Cris Cyborg walks in with the exact kind of public challenge that makes a situation even louder, because now the debate stops being abstract and turns into comparison. Cyborg publicly floated a $2 million offer for a fight, and Claressa publicly dismissed it, saying in substance that Cyborg couldn't even pay herself $2 million. So now look at the optics from the audience side. The same fans already arguing about what the real financial picture looks like hear one side say I offered $2 million and hear the other side say that number isn't real, and now they're not just comparing earnings, they're comparing credibility. They're asking which number is real, which number is promotional smoke, and who actually has leverage here. Again, this is not proof that Claressa made a bad decision. There are weight issues, business terms, risk calculations, and leverage games in every crossover conversation. But public perception does not grade on nuance. Public perception grades on vibes. And the vibe becomes you rejected one loudly advertised number while a different loudly advertised number is already under public debate. That's like trying to put out a grease fire with more grease. Of course people are going to talk. Of course people are going to say the stories are stacking up. Of course, people are going to ask if the brand is now being managed as aggressively as the boxing. This is where the cultural layer kicks in, because this conversation is bigger than Claressa alone. Claressa Shields exists at a weird intersection where resume, personality, historical importance, and audience fatigue all collide. She has real accomplishments, Olympic gold, titles in multiple divisions, a reputation as one of the most skilled women ever to lace them up. But because she has always had to self-promote aggressively, because women's boxing has not always handed out attention fairly, because she often has to be her own megaphone, there's always been this tension around her where even legitimate achievements arrive wrapped in argument. Some fans hear confidence and hear a champion forcing the market to respect her. Other fans hear confidence and hear overcompensation. Some hear 8 million and say finally. Others hear 8 million and say show me the paperwork. Some see a knee brace and think warrior. Others see a knee brace and think loophole for a future excuse. The point is, Claressa is no longer just being judged as a fighter. She's being judged as a symbol, a promoter, a business model, and a truth teller all at once. That is an impossible bundle to carry cleanly every single time. And when one part of the bundle slips, even a little, the crowd starts acting like the whole load is crooked. That's also why the internet is being extra petty about the details. Let's just say it. This is not one of those situations where a low-profile fighter can give 3 messy explanations and nobody cares by Tuesday. Claressa has made herself too big for that. She has made herself too quote-worthy, too combative, too headline-friendly. When you brand yourself as the GWOAT, every contradiction gets treated like a title eliminator. People are not just debating whether you won, they're debating whether the aura around you is still as bulletproof as the supporters say it is. And when the aura takes little scratches, the knee brace chatter, the purse chatter, the cyborg comparison chatter, those scratches get magnified because there are already people waiting to tell you the shine was manufactured. That's harsh, but that's the ecosystem. Boxing fandom is not a church choir. It's a jury with Wi-Fi. It is sarcasm, screen recordings, old interviews, quote tweets, and people who will turn one inconsistent sentence into a 3-day trial. So if Claressa's camp thought this win would shut everybody up, they underestimated how much the audience now cares about the off-paper story. The punches ended the fight. They did not end the questions.
And let me throw in the mid-video part right here, because this is the part some people are missing. The real issue is not that Claressa may have had a hard camp, or that a contract may have terms casual fans don't understand, or that a public offer from Cyborg may have been less clean than it sounded. The real issue is that every one of those things can be true, and the audience can still decide the storytelling around them was sloppy. That's the twist. This is not necessarily a scandal of facts. This may be a scandal of presentation. And sometimes presentation damage is just as bad, because once people decide you are always explaining after the fact, they stop listening to the headline and start waiting for the asterisk. That is dangerous for any star, because the asterisk kills awe. The asterisk turns celebration into debate. The asterisk makes a knockout feel like a press conference, and nobody wants their biggest nights remembered like accounting disputes with ring walk music in the background. Now let's go deeper, because this is where Captain Calculator and brace not brace discourse meet the actual business of combat sports. A lot of fans do not understand the difference between a declared purse, a minimum guarantee, a multi-fight package, a signing bonus, upside participation, sponsorship layers, and whatever side structures a deal may include. So when Shields says the $8 million is the minimum and the deal is actually bigger than that, that is not automatically nonsense. That can absolutely exist in real business language. Likewise, a commission-reported purse figure, if accurately circulated, does not necessarily define the entire financial package attached to a fighter for that event. Those can be different buckets. But here is where the industry keeps losing trust. The promotional machine loves simplification when simplification flatters the star, and then suddenly discovers complexity when simplification raises doubts. That is the pattern fans are reacting to across all of boxing, not just here. Big numbers get blasted everywhere. The structural explanation comes later, if ever. So people start to believe every announcement is half theater until proven otherwise. Claressa is not alone in that. Promoters do it, networks do it, managers do it, combat sports as a whole does it. But because Claressa's whole identity is tied to speaking forcefully, defending her worth, and claiming her seat at the table, she ends up wearing all the suspicion personally when the numbers sound too polished up front and too qualified afterward. And from a pure branding standpoint, that is where the deep analysis gets uncomfortable. Claressa has spent years trying to force women's boxing into a bigger commercial conversation. That means she cannot just think like a fighter. She has to think like a market maker. She has to make sponsors, casual fans, and broadcasters believe women's boxing can carry spectacle, revenue, and narrative heat. So I actually understand why the messaging is big. I understand why you go on television and say 8 million. I understand why you stress historic, why you stress barrier breaking, why you stress just do. But if you are going to operate like a market maker, then credibility is your oxygen, not just greatness. Credibility. Because the second the audience starts treating your headlines like marketing copy instead of trustworthy signals, you lose part of the thing you were trying to build for the whole sport. And that is why this matters beyond one fighter's feelings. If the public starts believing every women's boxing financial milestone comes with fuzzy math, that hurts the next woman trying to negotiate something real. If they start believing every visible injury detail is strategically emphasized depending on the moment, that hurts trust too. The hero in this story is women's boxing itself. The villain is not necessarily Claressa Shields the fighter. The villain is narrative inflation, the instinct to oversell first and clarify later. Because look at how clean the boxing facts are compared to the talking points around them. The boxing facts say Claressa went down to middleweight, came in under 160, weathered a strong opponent early, adjusted, landed the better shots, and stopped Kaye Scott in the 6th. Claressa herself said she cut 38 pounds, that camp was really hard, that she felt strong, and that she wants Lauren Price next at 160, ideally in the December to January window. That is a coherent fighter story. That story works. That story is enough. It's actually a strong story. Hard camp, difficult cut, visible brace, still got the stoppage, now targeting the next name. That already sells. So why does everything around it have to be turned into this hyper-glossed superhero trailer, where the numbers are bigger, the firsts are louder, the posture is sharper, and every challenge gets talked about like a movie monologue? That is the question, because when the core story is strong, extra embellishment becomes risk, not reward. And now we get to the truth bomb, because this is what I think is really happening here. Claressa Shields may not have a fighting problem at all. She may have a calibration problem. The fists are not the issue. The scale of the messaging is the issue. The skill is not the issue. The gap between headline and public interpretation is the issue. Every time Claressa talks, the message seems engineered to win the argument immediately, to dominate the room, dominate the timeline, dominate the clip, dominate the quote.
But arguments won in the moment can lose in the replay if the details need too much cleanup. That's what creates this too many stories energy around her. Not one catastrophic contradiction, a pile of little explanation moments, a brace that becomes a talking point, a deal number that needs context, a public challenge that triggers comparison, a legacy framing that invites historical fact-checking. None of these by themselves necessarily bury her, but stacked together, that is how audiences start saying, man, I don't know, something about this just feels produced. And once a star gets tagged with produced, every authentic achievement has to fight through an extra layer of doubt to be believed.
That is why I think the phrase "receipts not adding up" is resonating. It's not because fans suddenly discovered Claressa can't fight. It's because fans think the packaging keeps asking them to suspend common sense for the sake of a better press release. They're tired of feeling like every major claim arrives with a hidden appendix. They're tired of hearing numbers that sound enormous and then being told they do not mean what the public thought they meant. They're tired of having to decode whether a statement is literal, promotional, aspirational, or defensive. And when people get tired like that, they start reacting to tone as much as content. They start saying, just give it to me straight. They start respecting the fighter while distrusting the framing. They start splitting the person from the promotion. That is a dangerous split for anybody trying to carry a whole sport on their back. Now, let's land this where it belongs. Claressa Shields still deserves respect for what she has done in the ring. Full stop. The resume is real. The discipline to cut that kind of weight is real. The ability to dominate opponents across divisions is real. The ambition to keep women's boxing in the mainstream conversation is real. And if she truly signed a 2-year multi-fight agreement with an $8 million minimum structure and meaningful signing money, that is also significant. But respect does not exempt a star from scrutiny. In fact, real stars get more scrutiny, not less. So the audience is not wrong for asking questions. The audience is not wrong for comparing the 8 million language to the figures circulating online. The audience is not wrong for hearing the post-fight knee explanation and saying, okay, then help us understand the timeline. Those are fair reactions in a sport built on hype, ego, money, and receipts. The only way through that is clarity, not bigger attitude, not louder slogans. Clarity. And if I'm Claressa's team, that is the adjustment I make immediately. I stop trying to make every answer sound like a knockout. I stop trying to turn every clarification into another victory speech. I give cleaner, simpler, more concrete explanations before the internet creates its own. Because here's the irony. The more untouchable you try to sound, the more people search for touchable flaws. The more perfect the presentation, the more satisfying the nitpick becomes for your critics. Sometimes the strongest move is not to sound larger than life. Sometimes the strongest move is to sound specific. If the contract structure is real, explain it plainly. If a declared purse is only one piece of total compensation, explain it plainly. If the knee was sprained 2 weeks out and managed successfully, explain it plainly and leave it there. Do that, and suddenly a lot of this noise dies on its own. Don't do that, and every future victory gets escorted by the same question mark. Because moving forward, the stakes only get bigger. Claressa has said she wants Lauren Price at 160, and if that fight happens in the next window she mentioned, every single word around the buildup will be combed through. Every claim, every number, every health detail, every first, every biggest, every historic. That is the new tax of being Claressa Shields. You are not just fighting the opponent, you are fighting the archive of your own messaging. And the reason this matters so much is because the next chapter can either clean up the story or cement the reputation that the story always needs cleaning up. If she comes out sharp, transparent, and direct, the public may move on and remember the greatness first. If the same pattern repeats, monster headline, fuzzy interpretation, after-the-fact context, then this won't just be one commentary cycle, it'll become her permanent subplot. So that's my read on it. Claressa Shields won the fight, but the public is still debating the script around the fight.
The win was decisive, the messaging was not. The belts look clear, the optics look cloudy. And in today's sports culture, cloudy optics can hang around a champion way longer than a swollen eye or a tough round ever will. That's why this conversation is not going away. Not because the audience hates greatness, but because the audience hates feeling managed. And right now, whether fair or unfair, a lot of people look at this whole situation and feel like they're being asked to applaud first, calculate later. That's not how trust works. Trust works when the story stays the same even after people start checking the math.